Man, in this week's episode of Fight Night Picks Significant Strikes, we've got a big week in MMA, UFC Brasília. We're going to be talking about it in terms of under-the-radar headlines. Fight of the night that you might not be paying attention to, rising stars, and we have a new segment called Unranked Contender, all in this week's episode of Fight Night Picks Significant Strikes. Matt, let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's time for the Fight Night Picks podcast with your host, Craig.
And Matt.
Allen.
Matt, and welcome to another episode of This Week in MMA. Question mark kicks. Nope, this one is significant strikes. And Matt, if you're new to Fight Night Picks, which I know a lot of people might be, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram, as always, at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP. Those are the intros. Let's get down to business. So this week, Matt, we're going to be talking low-key fight of the night, rising stars, under-the-radar headlines. We're focusing in on UFC Brasilia, and the point here is the fact that low-key fight of the night, usually your co-main and your main event, they get a lot of the shine. You saw it with us last week where we brought on at JHK MMA, Mr. Kumite TV himself, John Yanko. We talked about these at great detail. This week, adding another wrinkle into it with Unranked Contender at the end of the show. I'm really looking forward to that, so we'll talk about that later on. But low-key fight of the night, fights that aren't getting the shine. Rising stars, maybe some of these fighters you haven't heard of yet. Under the radar headlines, you're getting a lot, again, main, co-main. We're getting a lot about Johnny Walker, Nikita Krylov. I know a lot of people are watching that video here, but we've got a couple that we're going to talk about that maybe haven't been getting that shine. And then Unranked Contender. Let's let the cat out of the bag right now. We have a fan submission of an in-depth breakdown into one of our fights. And it actually is our main event between Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira from at Mikalovic. You can find him there on YouTube. Mickey, it's a great breakdown, so you're going to want to stick around for that prediction. But Matt, without further ado, listen, let's get into the low-key fight of the night. Matt, I've got one that I think deserves some shine, and I talked about it in quite a bit of detail in our predictions, but also over on Between the Links with Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. I said this was a fight that I was most looking forward to, but what's your low-key fight of the night for this card?
So, it's kind of hard when you say low-key fight of the night, and that's a good thing to say. This fight night card is actually amazing. We haven't had a fight night card this good in a very long time, just due to the depth top to bottom. Like, there's so many names who just even the casual fans would know. But my fight of the night, low-key one, because I do think main event's probably going to be fight of the night, Juicy Formiga against Brandon Moreno. And it's not that it's low-key, its card placement's really weird to me. I understand Demi Maia is a bigger name than both those guys. You want him being co-main. But the third fight on the card should 100% be this. Because we talked about it in our 2-minute breakdown. This is more likely than not going to be a title eliminator. If Figueiredo and Benavidez comes together, if not, this fight has so much to do with the top of that flyweight division, and it's two of the more exciting guys in the division. Like, Brandon Moreno doesn't know how to have a boring fight, and Juicy Formiga is good at everything, so I'm extremely excited for it.
I want to comment on this here because, you've actually caught some flack in the YouTube comments for what you said about Juicy Formiga. You said he's a really hard power puncher, this and that. And yeah, he might not be a knockout artist.
No, but if you watch the Ben Yen fight, he drops him with a spinning back fist, and then he chokes him out. He's one of those fighters who, his knockout ends in a submission. He's going to drop you on the feet and then look to grapple with you. So even though he doesn't get the knockouts, maybe or the TKOs, he's definitely a very hard and heavy-handed guy. And Brandon Moreno, he just got that big question mark up. He's very exciting. He's very offense-oriented, but his defense isn't great. He's very hittable. And we saw in the Kai Kara France fight, he was able to not hurt Moreno, but he was definitely able to land big shots throughout the fight. And if Kai Kara France is able to land those shots, Formiga's going to be able to land those shots with a little bit more thud. So you might not have the same cardio by the third round. Just do all of the damage that you're accumulating.
And that's another bit of flack that we've caught, maybe. And I think it's a little undue because when I was pumping Brandon Moreno's tires, I said that draw against Askar Askarov, that was something, but a lot of people not high on Askar Askarov or not high at all on Kai Kara France. And
that's
listen,
fine.
I see it. I mean, Kai Kara France has a lot of fights under his belt for a younger guy, but at that point, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, and he's one of the more exciting fighters in one of the lower weight classes.
Well, not even that.
And he's ranked as well.
You fight the guys who you fight. You're either going to beat them or you don't. Like, he's beating these guys. That's the whole point. Like, he has wins in his last. Formiga lost his last fight, but that doesn't mean that he's not good. Like, people look at wins and losses too much when it comes to MMA. This isn't boxing. Like, if you want a guy to be really good by the time he gets to the UFC, he's going to have hard fights before that. That'll make him grow as a martial artist. So yeah, you can't really look at the record.
And the same thing goes for Askar Askarov, but in the opposite way. Because he's undefeated coming into the UFC. He has twister wins. Like, he's got kind of some crazy submissions. But you watch the way that he fought in ACB, I mean, just masterful.
Oh, yeah.
And he comes into the UFC and he tries the same stuff. Some of it doesn't work. Some of it really does. And I think for Askar Askarov, he's going to be one of those guys that, listen, I actually think this. If he doesn't crack it into the top 5, he's probably one of those guys that doesn't stick around for too long.
I don't think
but realistically, he's very highly talented, or he wouldn't be where he is today. Like, you can see that there is a championship pedigree. He has fought in those fights.
Askarov?
He's
Not
fought-
at all. He's never champ.
I'm not saying he's
Okay.
a champ in UFC,
Okay.
you donkey. You're just really playing into the comments.
I'm
but
really not, but
the point is,
you have me worried.
he has that championship pedigree from ACB. He's had a history of winning where he didn't have a loss. So he's bringing that into the UFC, which is always good to see because, again, in those lower weight classes, this is one of those things. You don't always get a lot of experience under your belt.
Not even experience. There's barely 15 guys in the division at this point. So
16.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of rematches. We're going to see a lot of trilogies because just due to the fact that there's not that many guys to fight. So we're going to see a lot of rematches down the line. But no, I think this fight's going to be amazing. Both guys have really good cardio. Both guys are exciting. They're going to grapple heavy. Both guys can strike. Like, they can really just do anything that MMA comes to. So I'm very excited for it. That's my fight.
And so now I'm going to put the hipster sunglasses on because I'm going to play into what you just said. I think 125 pounds right now. Listen, this was a conversation a couple of weeks ago. Does the UFC care more about the women's featherweight division or the men's flyweight division? Are we going to see the flyweight division around for much longer when you've got another title fight that's on a fight night card? Well, yeah, you are, because they keep adding to the friggin' division.
Exactly.
Like, it just keeps getting better and better. And you're seeing fighters like the very first fight that we have at 125 pounds, the second fight on the card, between Bruno Silva and David Dvorak. And I'm so excited for this fight because you've got David Dvorak, a guy that spent time on the regional scene. In his last fight with Octagon, it was Octagon 13. I just saw yesterday, Octagon 16 that was supposed to be coming up. They canceled that due to coronavirus. AFL's canceled. KSW today canceled.
That's not good.
UFC's still chugging along, and they're going to have
Paddy
an
Pimblett
event.
has a new opponent that was just announced today because his last one, who of course is Italian, was not able to fight. So he has a new opponent on 9 days' notice.
Yeah, coronavirus. Aries also had to cancel. But the point here is the fact that David Dvorak is going to be fighting Bruno Silva. And this is a really interesting matchup because in terms of strength of camp, and I know a lot of people in the comments are either agreeing or disagreeing, but David Dvorak, a guy that trains with London Shoot Fighters, I mean, you can speak to the level of coaching and training partners. I mean, Brad Pickett's a guy that spent a lot of time.
And Brad Pickett's the kind of guy that you want to become a coach. Like, everyone thinks that you want people like George St. Pierre to become coach. No, you want guys who have had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Guys like Mike Brown, guys like Benson Henderson, guys like Brad Pickett. Like, those are the guys who turn in to become those amazing coaches.
It's just like other major sports, and I know a lot of MMA fans, here's a big disclaimer, but in a lot of other major sports, hockey, basketball, football, what have you, it's not always the best player that makes the best coach. It's usually the player that struggled to keep a spot in the lineup, and they understand that type of mentality,
100%.
that grind, and they become good teachers and good leaders. So, yeah, you look at somebody like Brad Pickett, and even an Olga Rubin. Rubin traveled from Israel to train with London Shoot Fighters. Yeah, her fight against Julia Budd didn't go all that well, but she was undefeated up until that point. And still, I mean, the fact remains it's a good gym. But on the other side of the coin, Bruno Silva, I mean, it's iron sharpening iron. You're training with the Pitbull brothers. Of course, Patricio defends his belt this weekend against a formidable opponent in Pedro Carvalho. But there's all sorts of guys that he trains with. Henry Cejudo, the like.
One of the more stacked gyms in the whole world.
So it'll be interesting to see how that fight goes. I know, again, as far as the comments are concerned, a lot of people are saying, well, you know, Khalid Taha was a guy that fought at 145. He's coming down to 35, but he still missed weight. And they said that Bruno Silva fought a good fight. This is what I'll say. He lost. He got taken down and he got submitted. In that fight, he threw a lot of pressure and a lot of power. So you have to wonder if the power is going to translate back down again to 125. But I'm really looking forward to this fight. I mean, you've got a UFC debut where a guy's 17-3 with 15 finishes. You got a guy that spent time in tough, that, you know, he's really fought through a gamut. And he's got a bit of a wonky record. But again, like you said about a Kai Kara France, is the record, does it really precede him? I don't know. We'll see here.
I could definitely see this fight being one of those fights where, like, they're still talking about it by the time we get to the main card. There's always one of those where the commentators are like, oh, well, this might not be as good as that one from before. This is going to be it. I couldn't agree more with one of the underrated fight of the night.
So, low-key fight of the night, we took the hipsters way out. And we went with men's flyweight for both of them. But I think they're great fights. Matt, I'll throw you a little shade because you picked a featured prelim. But, hey, that's a hell of a fight. And if it becomes a potential title eliminator, you get the next challenger out of it, don't be surprised. So then we get into Rising Stars, which there's always some fighters on these cards that, again, like, it's their UFC debut, which for David Dvorak, he's kind of a rising star for sure. There's undefeated Myra Buena Silva. That's one that you could pick. I know a couple people in the comments again were saying that kind of hard to find some fight tape on her, but she's on Contender Series. She's already had a fight under her belt with the UFC, but she's been out for quite a while. Matt, in terms of rising stars, who are you going with this week?
I'm going to have the most mainstream pick ever, but let me defend it at least. I think Gilbert Burns has the biggest chance to become a star over the weekend, just due to the fact that Gilbert Burns has had really good wins, and he's beat a lot of guys who you recognize in the UFC, but he's never had one of those marquee wins against the top guy. He fought Dan Hooker before either guy was near the level of fame that they are now, and he didn't win. Now he has a chance to beat Damian Maia, who's not just an international star. They're fighting in Brazil. Like, I understand both guys are Brazilian, but Damian Maia is probably going to get the loudest pop of anyone on this card. And if you do get a win over him, that doesn't just prove that you're a top 10 guy. No. You should be main eventing from here on out, or being on the main card of pay-per-views. Like, this place that it puts you when you beat Damian Maia, guys like Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman, Tyron Woodley, those are your 3 last welterweight champions. And not to say Gilbert Burns, if he beats him, that's the level that he's going to attain. But when you beat a guy like Damian Maia, only good things happen. So I feel like he has the best chance to increase his star over the weekend. I understand he's starting at a point that many other guys on the card aren't already at, but it's just he has a chance to really explode in popularity over the weekend. So I feel like he's my best chance to have a rising star.
Matt going with the co-main event, not
and
a
featured
pick.
pre-lit. Yeah, I'm not doing great.
So for rising stars for me, I'm going to go down a little bit more. The fight before the feature prelim, you've got Amanda Hebus taking on the Afghan-Canadian and Randa Marcos. And Matt, we really focus in whenever Carla Esparza or Randa Marcos fights at 115. We're always
Scrappy.
focusing in just to see what we're going to get. Because, yeah, you always get a very competitive fight, and they either win or they lose, or in Randa Marcos' case, you throw in a draw there with Marina Rodriguez. But you look at this fight coming up with Amanda Hebus, and she's somebody that's 8-1. The one loss came to Polyana Viana back in 2015, so you can't put a lot of stock in that. Out of 8 wins, 6 of them by finish, 3 submissions, 3 knockouts. And in the UFC, finished Emily Whitmire in her last fight. It was a decision win over Mackenzie Dern where, yeah, and a lot of people had Mackenzie Dern to win. And I know in our prediction, you talked quite a bit about that fight because Mackenzie Dern was coming in off.
Like, she had just had a kid and she'd been out for a year. So I understand. Here's the other thing, though. I know we talk about how you can't look at records. It's not always who you beat, it's how you beat them. And I really do think that holds true. When you look like a guy like Andrei Koreshkov, he might not be able to beat like a Douglas Lima, but when you hand him someone who's not good, he's just going to spinning back kick them out of the cage pretty much.
Vaso Bakasevich.
Exactly. Like, there's levels to the game, and when you are able to show that someone's not even close to your level, yes, maybe you didn't finish them, but there wasn't a minute in that Mackenzie Dern fight that I don't think Amanda Hebus didn't win. So, no, I agree 100%. That's a really good pick.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that fight. And again, if you want
Where do you put her ceiling, if you don't mind me cutting in really quick? Like, do you see her one day being able to challenge for a title? Do you think it's going to take years to get to that level? What do you think she needs to work on? Like, where do you see her? Because with Gilbert Burns, I kind of took the easy way out. He kind of has all the skills to become a top 5 guy already. It's just a matter of, like, putting it all together and getting good matchups. But where do you think Hebus' ceiling is?
So I'm going to start by saying this. So she's taking on Randa Marcos, who, again, you want to follow the trend, win-loss, 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 draw, win-loss.
She won that.
She won her last fight. So it's either going to be loss or draw here. And listen, maybe it won't, and Randa Marcos gets the win, but Amanda Hebus fighting at home in Brazil. Where do I see her ceiling? Well, at 115, it's a weird division because, again, you've got Nami Yunus taking on Andrade. You've got Zhang Weili as your champ, who had a close split decision in one of the best fights we've ever seen against Ioana Jędrzejczyk. Tatiana Suarez, where is she going to be in the next year or so? Does she heal up and does she, have a tune-up fight and then she fights for the title? Nina Ansaroff's off for quite some time. Claudia Gadelha is really making a push for it. Would you put her against Gadelha? I think next fight, you got to go kind of close to that, top, let's say 7.
Would you do Joanna? Because she's 1-4 in her last 5. Or do you still think that that's too big of a hurdle for her?
I think that's too big of a hurdle. But if you look at women's 115, I mean, there's definitely fights that you can make. And if we had a look at ranking MMA, I'm sure we could get a better idea of it. But in terms of like fights, is there anybody that pops out to you that maybe if she beats Randa Marcos, because Randa Marcos for me is not, you can't say gatekeeper, but
she's a measuring stick for sure.
Yeah.
No, I think Claudia is probably the best pick. I always think, when there's an up-and-coming star, give them to Carolina, but she's so far gone at this point in her career. I really do believe that she's kind of shot. I think that if you beat Randa, you are in line for someone big. Her and Claudia did have that terrible fight not that long ago where they just kind of stared at each other the whole time. So maybe if Hebus can get a big win, that would definitely boost her up in the rankings. She could get a bigger fight with Claudia. But like you said, either the top of that division's either booked right now or they just fought and they kind of need recovery time. And she's going to be probably top 10 here soon. So you are going to have to get into sort of that marquee level at a certain point. I don't like her chances against, the Andrades, the Jaceks, the Rose Namajunas of the world. It's a real shame that Nina Ansaroff isn't fighting right now because I do think that would be a phenomenal fight. Congrats to her, though, for being pregnant. Michelle Waterson could be a really good one now that one pops up. I think it could be fun. She came off that big main event loss. And Hibas could be a fun one to come back to.
See, it's difficult, too, now that we have it. I mean, Marina Rodriguez is taking on Claudia Gadelha. You've got Michelle Waterson taking on Carla Esparza. It leaves you with some names in that division. And, again, this is all subjective based on rankings. But Brianna Van Buren would be a fun fight.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, these are two women that can finish fights, both heavy-handed, both can bring it to the ground.
100%.
I think Brianna Van Buren's the fight that you make. She's somebody that, Matt, I know, like, you kind of slag the Invicta Phoenix Rising.
I just don't. If you're gonna do a tournament, don't make it 1-round fights. That's all. Sorry.
But again, the last one that they had, especially with the open scoring and the fact that the 1-round fights don't count towards your record, it's definitely a good sign. So somebody that's been through that system before comes into the UFC, performs quite well.
100%.
I think that the hype might have evaded her because we haven't seen her in a little bit. I mean, Brianna Van Buren's last fight was against Lavinia Renata Souza back in July, and so. The wind in her sails, maybe it's not totally gone, but Souza was somebody that a lot of people were paying close attention to and thought that she could go on a run. So maybe you put, again, it's iron sharpens iron, and you have those two fight it out. Hibas Van Buren would be my pick. But again, for Rising Stars, there's all sorts of different people that you can pick on this card. Now, if we move on to under the radar headlines, this is an interesting one because this is one of those cards that really, you've had some shine taken away from it based on the fact that you just had a pay-per-view. The Adesanya and Romero fight was close. It was kind of boring. It looked like the controllers were stuck. Then you had a co-main event that was arguably the best fight of all time. And the entire card was great. I mean, people are still talking about Beneil Dariush and Drakkar Klose. And who would have thought about that? The co-main event. Now, this week, we have UFC Brasilia, and we put a lot of stock into all the predictions that we did. I mean, there were some fights that, hey, maybe you don't recognize, again, a David Dvorak or Bruno Silva or the like, but it is a good card. But what's the real, under-the-radar headline that you're tracking this week?
I've got two of them. One's just more of a fun stat. I was looking through Charles Oliveira's record. He's actually never lost in Brazil. He's 16-0 in his home country, which is always interesting just because, when you have a guy, for instance, Li Jingliang fought last weekend. He's never lost in China, but he's never won outside of China. And it's always interesting just to see, because there's kind of a debate as to whether or not there is a home crowd advantage in MMA, because sometimes you get booed, go out there and do great, and then other times you get cheered and do terrible. It's just a really weird... MMA is just such a weird sport, really, just by definition. And for a guy who's never lost in his home country to have all that confidence, he's going to have such a big crowd reaction when he comes in. And Brazil's a famous place for being hard to fight in when you're not Brazilian, when everyone's screaming, "Ush, va morrer," which is "you're going to die," which is so intimidating. And Kevin Lee, who has missed weight in the past, that's always a concern you have to have. But my thing is, my under-the-radar headline, not really under the radar, I just think it's important to talk about. Johnny Walker blamed everyone except for himself for his last loss. And this is one of those times that's really put up or shut up. You can't lose 2 in a row, especially if he gets finished by Krylov. Krylov at one point had a lot of respect of people who only watch UFC. And then when he left and came back, we never saw the best version of him come back. And that's really been a problem. He's been inconsistent. He's had really good performances. He's had awful performances. There really hasn't been much of an in-between.
He's only had 3 performances, and he lost 2 of those performances.
Exactly. He hasn't looked all that great. So if Johnny Walker can't get past Krylov, like you said for Marcos, Krylov's kind of like that measuring stick for the light heavyweight division, where if you can beat him, good. You belong in that top 15. If you can't beat him, though, where are we going? And for Johnny Walker, this is such a big fight in his career. And I don't even know if anyone realized this so far. If Johnny Walker doesn't win this, there's no more flying knees. There's no more having fun to the level that he was before. There's just a lot of, that guy needs to stop playing around and start training a lot harder. So I feel like this is very much a make or break fight for Johnny Walker in his career.
That's a good one. I mean, in terms of under the radar headlines for me, there's one that lumps in together. And I noticed there was a comment this afternoon over on YouTube under the fight in which Renato Moicano is moving up to 155 pounds. People didn't know that. So yeah, he spent all the time in the UFC at featherweight. Now he moves up to 155. But you also have a fighter at 115, 125, 135, and Veronica Macedo. I mean, she's fought at flyweight in the UFC. It didn't really translate all that well. She lost 3 in a row. Then she goes out in her last fight and absolutely looks insane. I mean, first round submission finish. She looked great. It was a great win for her, and she's still in the company. And then she's booked to take on Ariane Lipski at 125. She's out due to concussion-like symptoms. Then she's booked at 115 to take on Amanda Lemos. can't go into that fight. Still recurring headaches. Now she's booked at 135 against Bia Malecki, who has been a featherweight before.
She's huge, yeah.
She competed on The Ultimate Fighter at featherweight. So she's really, really big. I mean, I think if we're not mistaken, it was 10 inches of reach was the difference. There was a large height disadvantage for Macedo. Now, Macedo's more than likely going to try to take the fight 100%. To the ground based on the fact that, not that she won her last fight by submission, but based on the fact that Bia Malecki is a Muay Thai practitioner. She was a world and European...
Her grappling has been suspect.
European Muay Thai champion, amateur Muay Thai champion. Really tall, really rangy, and keeps her hands high versus Macedo, who, again, it's going to be weird moving up from 25, training at 15 or 415, and then back at 135. So you've got a fighter that was supposed to fight in possibly 3 different weight classes versus a guy that's fought at 45 consistently and was ranked quite highly at one point. A lot of people thought Renato Moicano in the Ortega fight, man, this guy's going places.
Even in a loss, he had showed so much in his striking and his defensive grappling up until he got caught in the guillotine, of course, that, the sky was the limit for him. And then he came back and fought Calvin Kattar, who everyone's really high on now. If you don't remember, that fight wasn't close at all. Renato Moicano beat the brakes off him. And then it's just been, top performance after top performance. But when you look at the level of guy who he fought Jose Aldo, arguably the greatest fighter ever.
He was going to fight for a title off 2 losses.
And the Korean Zombie, who has, just unnatural power for the size of him. And, there's no shame in those. So for him to think that he needs such a big change to move up in a weight class is really surprising. I thought he would stick around at 145. But he is big. He's a very tall, very thin guy, kind of. So there's not a lot of weight to really cut from him. So that weight cut must have been terrible, and he must have felt like it was taking a lot away from his performances. But when you just look at his skills, he's amazing on the feet. He's amazing on the ground. The only problem is every now and then he gets caught. But he only gets caught to the highest level of strikers. So, Renato Moicano, if he can win this, he could really go on a run at 155.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting fight against Damir Hadzovic, a guy that can, he push the pace. He's decent off his back foot. The spinning attacks, the good low kicks. It should be a good... again, you get Johnny Walker taking on Krylov. That's a very good measuring stick. This one, again, Renato Moicano, I don't think it's the easiest win out there, but it's a good fight, especially when you're making your debut at 55 in the UFC. So those are our low-key fight of the night, our rising stars, our under-the-radar headlines, and now a new segment. And listen, we had Mickey from Mikalovic. You can find him over on YouTube. He decided to make a pick for our main event between Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira, and I really like the things he was sharing with us here. So let's hear from an unranked contender who's now to be ranked. Mickey, take it away.
Guys, my name is Mickey, and today I'm going to be talking about Fight Night 170 taking place in Brasilia in March 15th. We're talking about the main event here. I don't think we realize it, okay? Kevin Lee against Charles Oliveira. So straight off the bat, in my opinion, Kevin Lee is one of those fighters who tends to get in people's heads, okay? Like when I hear Kevin Lee and I see Kevin Lee, I think of past press conferences where he just got in the other person's head. And he's just very, very good at talking trash. He's a really witty dude. And at the same time, he's such an explosive fighter. Like he'll start off, he'll feel you out, talk a bit of, smack, and then he'll just explode at you and just boom, 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 and start unleashing. So I think that's something that characterizes Kevin Lee as an amazing fighter. His record is currently 18-5, 18 wins, 5 losses. But he's going against Charles Oliveira. And I think this dude is someone who's extremely underrated at the moment. Like, he's an extremely talented grappler. Most of his famous finishes have actually come from the ground game. If we think of a few, we have against Elkins, where Elkins picked him up, threw him on the ground, and as he fell, he got a guillotine that ended up turning into a triangle, right? And then he finished with an armbar and he terminated him. Another example was against Guida, okay? He got that right punch in his face. After that, got him in that guillotine and then lights out. And Guida's a big dude. So that goes to show that Oliveira, he's someone that if he gets you in that guillotine or in those locks, it's game over. So I think in this fight, like, I'm going to have to favor Oliveira also because they're fighting in Brasilia. Charles Oliveira is Brazilian, so he's got the home court advantage basically here. And also, Kevin Lee seems like, to me, one of those fighters that he tends to get in his head a little bit. and he tends to panic, I think, under those situations. If Kevin Lee does not stick to the game plan, and he goes in because he tends to dive in like a bulldozer, that's Oliveira's game. Because Oliveira, we know how good he is at locking with the guillotine and with all these different arm bars and triangles and things. And so that is why Oliveira, in my opinion, will win this fight. And so this isn't to take away from the fact that Kevin Lee, I think, is a great fighter. He's got a phenomenal record. But I think if there's any time for Charles Oliveira to shine in the UFC division, this is his time. Because he's being paired, just the fact that he got paired with someone like Kevin Lee shows just how Charles Oliveira is beginning to step up. He's been here for a really, really long time here. And so I want him to do well. So for my fight pick for Fight Night 170 in Brasilia, with the fighters Kevin Lee against Charles Oliveira, I'm going to have to go for Charles Oliveira here from some form of hold. He's just so versatile in that holding game. I think he's going to catch Kevin Lee off guard, put him in a hold, and then it's game over.
All right, Matt. Really want to thank Mickey for sending us his pick. And
thank
maybe you have a pick out there. You want to send them to us. You can find us, as always, at Craig Allen FNP and at Matt Allen FNP on Twitter and Instagram. Or you can share it to the main page at Fight Night Picks. We're also on Instagram now. We actually had a couple of people reach out. They reached out to me, and they reached out to the main one, not to you. But with some questions about some of the picks. Listen, we're by no means experts, and if you're going to start throwing hard numbers at us, please don't. It gets difficult. You're putting on too much added pressure. But still, really want to thank Mickey. So if you have something that you want to throw at us, if you got an insane hot take or pick that you want to see out here, let us know. Seriously, because it was great having Mickey. Make sure you check out his channel. I'll have a link below. But in terms of that fight, in terms of our main event, you got Charles Oliveira, you've got Kevin Lee. I know when we made our pick, 5-minute main event pick, which we do with the fight nights, as long as it's not a title main or a title, we're going to do 5 minutes on it. But still, I had Kevin Lee, you had Kevin Lee, Mickey's taking Oliveira. Oliveira's on a great run. I know a lot of people are, in the comments, they're pretty negative about Charles Oliveira. Just based on the level of competition that he's fought. And that's the thing. But when you tie in the fact that he's won every fight in Brazil, it really makes you wonder, is he going to be able to get a win? And if he wins, is he going to be able to finish Kevin Lee?
So this is the way I see it. When we break everything apart and look what everyone does better. So Oliveira is definitely better at jiu-jitsu. I don't think anyone's going to argue that with me. Kevin Lee's definitely better at wrestling. And then when we get into the striking, I would say Oliveira's probably the more technical striker. He likes that high tie stance. He throws a lot of leg kicks. He'll throw some spinning techniques and some crane kicks and whatnot, front kicks. Kevin Lee has the power advantage, though, and it's not even close when it comes to that. Oliveira can put you down. He did it to guys like Jared Gordon and Nick Lentz. Kevin Lee, when he hits you, though, as Gregor Gillespie found out, he puts you into another dimension. The problem is he has pretty basic striking. He's going to just pop the jab, throw left straights, throw the high kick. He's not going to switch it up too much.
You're telling me Dewey Cooper's pupil has poor striking?
No, he has really good striking. It's just not that complex of striking. So this is the problem. If Oliveira wants to win this fight, it's going to have to go to the ground, because I just don't think he has enough power to put down Kevin Lee. Now, we've seen Kevin Lee have a questionable chin in the past, but that's only because he's fought Edson Barbosa, Ali Quinta, Tony Ferguson. What's better, to lose to Tony Ferguson or to beat Jared Gordon? And that might be a tough question to answer, but when you look at the things that Kevin Lee did well against Tony Ferguson, I know a lot more about Kevin Lee than I do from Charles Oliveira knocking out Jared Gordon in the first round. You can tell a lot more in a loss where a guy actually does really well against a really good guy than a win against a guy who hasn't had a win against a guy who's still in the UFC. So I think Charles Oliveira, it's a winnable fight for him. I think he's going to have to drop Kevin Lee, though, to win. I know that's a weird caveat to have. I feel like if Charles Oliveira gets one knockdown, if he can rock Kevin Lee hard enough to then take him down, or where he's on the ground, he can get on top, he'll be able to finesse his way into a submission. But that's the only way I see Charles Oliveira winning. I think it's a winnable fight for him, but I think he just has to check so many boxes to get that win that it's more likely than not Kevin Lee's going to be able to either wrestle his way to a decision or wrestle and keep on damaging Oliveira every time they go to the ground. Because here's the problem. If Kevin Lee's on top of Oliveira, Kevin Lee's pretty much safe. He's a really, really good grappler, and he's strong enough on top that he's not going to really have to worry about a lot of those submissions of Oliveira. If Kevin Lee ever gets reversed, though, it's the worst position in probably all of MMA. Because, A, wrestlers are never that great off their back. It's just a consistent thing. If you're a really good wrestler, you're not really training to get taken down a lot. And Oliveira on top, it's just going to throw a tornado of submissions at you.
Really, when you look at Kevin Lee's UFC career, I can think of 2 fights where he was on his back. Really. I can think of 2.
hit me with them.
Iaquinta the first fight, and
Yeah.
then the fight against Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
And he lost. So
It's
take that for what it's
But
worth.
here's the problem, though. Like, Tony Ferguson's better than both these guys at pretty much everything. This is why I think, though, Kevin Lee's going to win. All he has to do is wrestle him for 15 minutes and survive 10. If you really look at it and simplify it that much, what's more likely? That Oliveira's going to be able to go out there, hit Kevin Lee with a strike meaningful enough to put him down, and then work his way for a submission before the round ends? Or Kevin Lee just needing 3 takedowns? I think Kevin Lee can get 3 takedowns easier than Charles Oliveira can land a front kick and a Darce choke. So Charles Oliveira can definitely win. There's a path to victory. It's just that path to victory, he's going through woods. He's going to go across the river. Like, it's going to take a lot to get there. Kevin Lee just has to wrestle for 15 minutes, and he should be able to at least set himself up for a decision. We can talk about Brazilian commissions and their judges some other time. I don't think that's going to come into play in this fight. I feel like I'm going to go as far as to say that this is my lock of the week. I think Kevin Lee is so underrated right now because people don't like his personality, and people always, they always go back to the losses that he's had. But really good prospects, if they don't have those losses early in their career, they never turn into anything great. Like Max Holloway lost early in his career, went on a 14-fight win streak. Like, you need that adversity early on in your career so that you know what you have to work on. And I feel like Kevin Lee's really in that part of his career, especially at TriStar.
Let's put it in terms of Fight Night picks, Matt. I talked into a microphone for 2 hours twice a week, and nobody listened. We did fight interviews. We had a radio show at one point. And now we're here. And we really appreciate everybody tuning in. We really appreciate Mickey hitting us up for the Unranked Contender. He didn't know that was going to be the name of it. But now you're ranked. You're ranked. And we really appreciate you for joining in. Matt, we covered low-key fight of the night. Rising stars. Under the radar headlines. We added in a wrinkle of the Unranked Contender. And listen, maybe you want to see the show change. Maybe you like a different dynamic. Maybe we get rid of Matt. Maybe we get rid of me. We'll see what happens. But no, we're really looking forward to this. We love doing this show because it just adds a light on some of those things that don't get as much shine as they probably should. Matt, do you have any parting thoughts?
I just think this is one of the better fight nights that we've had in a long time.
And it could be the last fight night we see for a while.
That's true. MMA events are getting canceled left, right, and center, so you might as well watch them when you can. But this fight's just great top to bottom. I highly recommend watching each and every one. Don't just be a main carder who's like, oh, I'll watch the main card. Because this card's absolutely stacked. They always put together a good one when they go to Brazil. And just watching it, and you can hear the crowd, and just kind of like the energy that's in the arena, it's an amazing feeling. So it's going to be a great fight card. And yeah, I'm very excited.
Really excited for all the fights coming up. You're not going to want to miss those with Fight Night picks, Matt. As always, you can check out our UFC Brasilia picks right over there. So make sure you do. And Matt, as we always say with Fight Night picks,
Let's get into it.
let's get into it.